Hey guys, so today I want to compare the San Francisco and LA AI scenes because I think they're quite different, but they're both in California and they're something that I've been interacting with a lot lately, going between San Francisco and LA. So just for a little context, I have been in LA for the last 5 years. And then in the last 2 years, I've been interacting a lot with San Francisco, coming up here for conferences, for AI events, and participating in the general culture. I'm also from the Bay Area, so I kind of have that context of being a Californian. I also lived outside of California for about 15 years and returned here and came to LA. So I would say that I'm fairly new to LA, even though it's been 5 years. I feel like it actually takes like 10 years to really sink into LA. Um, and so I'm only halfway through my journey. And as well as I think LA is a little hard to navigate socially. I've talked to a lot of people about this. LA is it's got a lot of different scenes. Hollywood looms large. There's also this, fast food universe. It's fast food capital of arguably the world, definitely America. In-N-Out, McDonald's, all these major fast food companies are from LA. And then of course like SpaceX, and there's a lot of other industries here. LA is massive. It's a sprawling universe that is very, very complex. Um, and it's not as monocultural as you would think. You kind of have to there's all of nooks and crannies of LA that you kind of discover over time. At the same time, Hollywood does loom large, and that's what I interact with most in terms of AI. And of course there's this cross pollination between tech. Snapchat and YouTube and all these companies are down here. Um, but tech is not as big as Silicon Valley, of course. But the kind of larger conversations in Los Angeles is, you know, post the strikes, which in my opinion were really kind of dominated by what happened with streaming. How did streaming change the face of, media and Hollywood and all that? Because streaming essentially killed a little bit of the theater business. It killed definitely the DVD business, which is, a big chunk of sales that, played a part in sustaining the theater business post theater sales, right? And now we have this universe or this audience and this market where people go to movies and then they go see it on streaming. They're already paying for the streaming. They're not going to pay for another set of DVDs, which is how money, happened prior. And that caused, in my opinion, and other things, of course, that it caused the strikes. And of course, streaming also changed the way that writers specifically, get paid, and producer, director, all that kind of stuff, right? And just as the strikes are, closing out or halfway through, AI started to come up. Like ChatGPT started to become a bigger and bigger thing, right? And one second, I'm going to take a drink out of my Stein here. But I think that is a really interesting context here for AI to arrive into. And Los Angeles in general, I think, is historically kind of lethargic with new technologies. I think things like YouTube and Netflix, were, people were kind of eyeing them, as they came, but did not wholly embrace them. And then even things like the Red camera and things like that arrived into LA in a particular way and moment. And I think AI is easily even scarier than those technologies, than streaming and all that, because there's not only is the Hollywood picture of the Terminator and Skynet and anything of that nature, in which, AI from HAL to Wall-E or whatever, AI is portrayed as kind of dangerous, right? And there's the doomers that we also have in Silicon Valley, but that being a big part of the consciousness in Hollywood, in addition to stealing of copyrighted material, stealing of creativity, and the disruption of creativity, where we thought, this kind of common thing where we thought we were going to get laundry folding robots, and instead we got art, AI tools that arguably are disrupting, the most difficult starving artist jobs out there. And so it has an existential impact on how people think about creativity. And so I think that looms over Los Angeles, right? The how Silicon Valley, from Napster to Netflix to YouTube to Red cameras to whatever, have disrupted Hollywood's core businesses in ways that really definitely opened up things, right? Like Sony having Sony Pictures and Sony gaming and all that, right? Sony PlayStation, etc. It's like gaming being a disruptive force as well. Definitely enriching opportunities, but at the same time disrupting very fundamental things to what Hollywood is. Um, that being the consciousness going into AI, which already has a lot of baggage philosophically, right? And so I think that's what's interesting when I look at what's happening in Los Angeles when I'm talking to different agencies or studios or people who work in the traditional industries. There's a kind of anxiety or even anger about it. And at the same time, there is that bunch of people who have not worked in maybe at the top level. Maybe they are not, but there are also people who are working the top level. But there are people who maybe have been trying to make it in Hollywood for a very long time, but have had a hard time because they're climbing up certain ladders that are either hard to climb up or distracting, right? Like I know plenty of people who are, let's say, actors or writers or whatever, but they have to do another job because they can't get enough money from this job. And now Hollywood is being disrupted again, so it's even harder to make that kind of money. And here comes AI, right? But at the same time, those same people, the subset of those people, are looking at AI opportunistically, and those are kind of the stealth group of people in some ways. Like they're kind of it's almost punk rocky in some ways, in which these folks are maybe they do have director chops, producer chops, or acting chops, or what have you, and now they're looking at AI as an opportunity to kind of disrupt their own careers or chart a new path where they think that AI is next. It's just generally the mainstream Hollywood hasn't quite embraced it. At the same time, you got Runway having a deal with Lionsgate. You got James Cameron being on the board of Stability.ai. You got Blumhouse. I think there was some news that they had some kind of partnership with AI. So there is rumblings, and these are only three like public examples. In my opinion, probably all the studios and all the agencies that are in LA are experimenting with AI either in secret or in semi-publicly, right? And there's just that anxiety, there's that fear around the unions, right? And that conversation and everything I've just mentioned influencing the way the conversation is happening, right? So philosophically, that's kind of where we're at. And I have to wonder, right? Like, how does that shift when things change, when everybody becomes more public, when it's not just James Cameron, it's Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, or and Reese Witherspoon and Harrison Ford, whatever, all these bigger and bigger actors and directors embracing AI more publicly, then is there a larger and larger sea change in the ecosystem? I mean, we're already seeing that in music, right? We've got Kanye West just came out with an AI music video a few days ago. Snoop Dogg did one. I think AI is going to disrupt music video, probably the theme of another video later, but that is happening right now. And so what happens when all those kind of like currently anti-AI people have to grapple with the reality that AI is here and it's here to stay, and it might actually lead to some interesting outcomes for everybody, where it might actually be healthy, where people might get more jobs out of it. Who knows? But I think that's kind of where we sit now in LA. Right now, then San Francisco, it's so funny because San Francisco is where software eats the world, where tech is kind of like an inevitability. We've got people from all over the world moving to the Bay Area to live here because they see the tech opportunities. At the same time, tech has had these kind of disruptive layoffs in the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, in which there was that aggressive hiring spree in the pandemic, and now we're kind of like leveling back to post-pandemic levels. But at the same time, there is this kind of inevitability around AI. It's just very coder-centric, very LLM-centric. And so when my background or my emphasis is on creative Gen AI. And so as we've been doing events here in the Bay Area, it's been different. There's a lot of more nerdiness, I would say, coming in to San Francisco into these events. And so there's not a lot of people who have storytelling chops necessarily. At the same time, Pixar, Lucasfilm, YouTube, these are Netflix. These are major media entertainment companies that are either founded here in the Bay Area or have major offices and influence here. And so like that dynamic between creation, entertainment, and media is deep in San Francisco, Bay Area. And we already see, and all the major companies, right? Google, Meta, Facebook, they're all playing Apple, even they're all playing in creative Gen AI, but they're kind of approaching it from the perspective of more like casual creators. They're putting, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, where they're putting these tools within the feeds or within the chat groups or within the search functionality in a way that it is kind of more casual led, more consumer led, because I think that's the mentality here. Is it's a product led mentality. I mean, it's funny because we did an event. We've been doing these events where we get people to essentially, it's like a hackathon, right? We call it a Gen Jam or a Gen Battle. And in these Gen Jams, we get people to essentially create a short film or a music video or a game or what have you in 2 to 3 hours, right? And we use all the latest AI tools to do so. And it's funny because in LA, it's very storytelling centric, where people are creating a short film. They want to create more short films after they gain these skills. When we do that in San Francisco, we do find that some people, they kind of think, oh, how can I turn this into a creative product? How can I turn, like, now I have a short film skill. How can I turn this into like a video product that then interacts with me in some way? And so that's really interesting. At the same time, there's definitely that sliver of people who want to be creative, who want to use that as a film, but or use that to make film and use those filmmaking skills to make more films. But that's kind of an interesting trend here. And we see people are interested in design, in product, and user interface, in creator content, rather than necessarily creating like stories and fiction and that kind of thing. And so that's a really interesting dynamic there. And I could see how these two cities are kind of converging in very different ways, right? Where LA is grappling with, hey, is this even something that we want to support? And also we're secretly working on it. And also what's happening when the antis just have to grapple with the inevitability. And then in San Francisco, it's like, hey, it's inevitable. It's just a question of how and what, and maybe also how do we monetize that and productize that. So that's really, really interesting to me. And that dynamic, it makes me wonder about what are other cities and how do other cities like kind of exude whatever values they have and whatever dilemmas that they have, and how that is kind of reinforced or kind of like disrupted by AI. I mean, if you've read the essay by Paul Graham, I think it's called Cities, in which he talks about like what do different cities exude, right? Like New York, is it power and money or what have you, and fashion and media. And then you go to Silicon Valley and maybe that's more about power than money, because you're not trying to show off like your fancy cars. Well, maybe lately, but historically people aren't showing off their wealth as much as they're showing off, hey, how much I can influence and exert power over the destiny of tech. And then in Hollywood, it is kind of money centric. It's in LA, it's kind of money centric, but it's also kind of like, it's also influence and fame, and it's a little bit more transactional in a certain way. And so like, how do all these things and these dynamics run up against AI, which is a kind of a existential looming industry and technology, and it kind of is a mirror for us, right? Like when any industry interacts with AI for the first time, it has to contend with what are the true values of that industry, where we're seeing that AI overwhelmingly the biggest use case is code, right? And so like, if code is the biggest use case and people are using it to create code is the bedrock of Silicon Valley, code and money in some ways, right? And maybe chips. It's like, if that's true and code is foundational, then, and AI is disrupting that, then we have to reevaluate what is the real value of code from the human point of view. What is the human bringing to that? What is a 100x engineer bringing to the code that an AI is not doing or cannot do? And I think we've seen people say like it's the idea person. And so what does that mean if, only the idea people win in a world like Silicon Valley, in a world like Hollywood, Los Angeles, in a world like New York and other cities, in a biotech hub like Boston or whatever, or an academic hub like Boston? Like, how do all these things get disrupted? And it's so interesting to me. So I loved, if you're from a different city, please like jump in the comments, leave something there. But yeah, that's a few of my thoughts on the difference between San Francisco and LA's AI scenes. California being the major hub that it is for innovation, media, entertainment, and all that. It's really going to be interesting to see that kind of converge as it evolves. So I'm going to probably jump back to this in like a year or maybe even sooner, and just kind of do a review of how these cities have evolved with AI. So, all right, guys, I'll see you in the next one, and thanks so much for watching. Bye.